Recently, I was complaining to my personal men's group about being tired, about being disappointed, and just having kind of an ambivalence about men's work and the men that I were working with in general. I mean, I've been doing this self development thing for going on 20 years. And, what I find is oftentimes guys are more interested in playing video games and, distracting themselves with porn and things like that than they are about really doing any kind of serious work. And I was just getting burnout and quite frankly, just tired. And I started even talking about maybe I should just retire from this and start doing something else. Maybe I should just go be an artist because that's what I did before all of this. And then one of my brothers brought out what we refer to in our group as the sacred dick, and he slapped me in the face with it. Welcome to the Nice Guy Show. My name's Chuck Chapman, and I'm joined by my co-host, Faisal Coker and Ari Greff. And the three of us are coaches dedicated to helping nice guys become the best versions of themselves. Together, we have decades of experience helping nice guys level up their game. Our mission is to help men develop confidence and the skills to get the kind of love, sex, and success that they desire. So, what is a sacred dick, you might be asking? Well, the word sacred comes from the Latin term saucer, which means to make holy. Over time, this word kind of evolved into an old French word meaning sacre, which is consecrated, holy, or even accursed. And then as we entered into the Middle Ages, sacred started being used around the 14th century to call things that are important to give them a sense of reverence. Now, Dick, on the other hand, has evolved from the nickname Richard, and at some point it meant more of a vulgar term, and we started using it to kind of name our member. And it started to be used in a way to describe anything that was vulgar or a vulgar person. So the sacred dick is a term that we use to describe something that I say with great reverence and love, but in a very clear and direct way. So in my case, my friend, he called me out. He said, wham, wham, Chuck. He's like, put on your big boy pants and like step up. You need to be a better leader. He says, why aren't you inspiring the men you work with? Why are you being a nice guy? And it was like water being thrown in my face. It just sort of woke me up. And rather than getting offended, I was like, oh, you're right, you know? And what it was just what I needed because I didn't need in that moment sort of a gentle, empathetic, oh, your feelings are valid and we really honor that. I needed somebody to just slap me in the face with a sacred dick. And so I want to talk about the sacred dick in terms of as nice guys, we can oftentimes be too soft and not call other people out. So let's talk about the sacred dick. So Ari and Faisal, let's start with you. Have you ever called someone out with their BS to wake them up, or has anybody ever called you out?
Yes and yes. So I've had both aspects where, I've been called out. Actually, I was called out a lot, especially in some of my relationships. So she had the sacred fanny, if that's a term. Yeah.
Sacred vagina.
Yeah, or fanny as we call it in the UK or something.
Oh, is that a fanny? We call it fanny.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I remember at one point after my divorce, I met this girl, and I mentioned this in one of the podcasts as well. We're walking along the river, and I'm complaining, I'm sad, I'm this victim mentality, and I said, how life, difficult is as a divorced dad and single dad and parenting, and I'm nearly losing the house, and I'm yada 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 yada. And she just looked at me and she said, "Oh, poor Faisal." Yeah, and she was like, "Oh." And I was really hurt. I was really, unlike you, I took offense to that. I was like, how dare you? There I am as a man expressing my emotions because, men, we need to express our emotions. And the next thing you know, I've just been humiliated or shamed. But it was a really good wake up call because that kind of like shocked me. I needed that shock. And
Mhm.
and and that's what this does, is that calling out the bullshit, we need that shock. And I recently had a guy I spoke to, and I called out his bullshit, because in my coaching practice, I do that, calling out some of the stuff that guys don't want to see. And so this is a guy that he said, I've been doing this and this and this, and he's married, he's cheating on his partner, and with another married woman. I was thinking, what the fuck are you doing? Why? What are you doing here? And what he really came to me was he wanted to complain, he wanted to cry about it, and he just wanted someone to feel sorry about it. But I was like, no, you need to pull yourself out of this and really look at yourself. And he was shocked. He was like, taken aback a bit. Afterwards, he said, I'm really thankful. And like all the people have called out my bullshit, because I have blind spots as well. I'm forever grateful because I know when there's a complaint, or when there's a nag, or when there's something like that, there's something to get curious about.
Yeah, and I think that as nice guys, we typically we want everybody to like us. So we're afraid if we call somebody out on something that we're going to upset them and they're not going to like us. And then we start to rationalize in our brain. Well, maybe it's not that big a deal. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. And I think in some ways we're withholding our gift when we do that, and I think that can really be detrimental. How about you, Ari? What's your experience with the sacred dick?
Well, I had a particularly magical sacred dick hit me in the face.
Yeah,
Um,
you're welcome. Yeah.
uh, so when I signed up, I had just read No More Mr. Nice Guy. This was a few years ago, and I had signed up for the virtual men's group with Robert Glover. So I really didn't know what I was getting into. It was my first interaction with him, and then the very first group, I think it was the very first hour, we got to introduce ourselves. So I was telling my story. Um, I think he hit me with the dick a couple times actually. He he I was telling my story, and I was starting with since the dawn of time. So first he hit me because I was going on and rambling. So he called me a ruminator. He said, "Do you have a ruminating brain?" I was like, you've known me for 2 minutes. Like I got defensive. Like who are you? Like you're supposed to be a therapist or a coach, and like you're calling people out after 2 minutes. So that pissed me off actually. Um, but he was right. I do. I can go on and on. The other thing he hit me with was I was talking about, I had literally like that same week just started dating this woman who I was obsessed with. She looked like Rihanna. I may have talked to you guys about her before. Um, but I was just like, I went out with her twice that week, and I just like wanted to spend as much time as I could with her. Um, and so he got on me about, you're just jumping into a relationship. You know, you're doing what an unconscious dater would do, which is, you jump into bed with someone, it turns into a relationship like right away, because you feel happy that you're getting sex with an attractive woman, and it feels really good, but you're not really thinking about, is this someone that you are compatible with. Once you jump into bed, it's harder to judge their character and harder to judge the compatibility. So he recommends that people take some time. So that was another thing where I was like, I was just like in heaven dating this new woman, and he just like knocked me back down. So that was all I think in the very first meeting. And so, yeah, I had a sore bottom after that. So, yeah, Dr. Glover, uh, he's good at it. So,
Yeah, that's that's why why he wrote the book, The Big Stick. He probably should have changed it to The Big Dick, but him and Tony wrote The Big Stick together because he says sometimes you got to get out the big stick. Um, well, when do you think it's appropriate to pull out the sacred dick, and when isn't it?
Oh, I think you got to have some temperance with it as well. And, like as a dad, as a parent, this is something I would say is not always easy because, sometimes you want to call the kids out for their sloppy or bad behaviors that they have, but also you got to then keep in mind that they're still kids. And when I'm with say, for example, with my family, sometimes I can go overboard with something, and then my sister will call me out on that. And then she's very good at that. She says, actually, you know what, or my ex-wife or something, they'll call something out because I remember when Dr. Glover said, he said the purpose of a couple is to protect each other from our own shit. So she's going to protect you from your shit to passing on to the kids, and you're going to do the same as well. And that's a really conscious parenting. I've also realized that I was on a date once, and I was listening to this girl, and she was complaining. She was complaining about the situation, her kind of like triangle that she was in a relationship with, and I just called her out on it. And I said, "Look, you know, you're first of all, you're talking about relationships, and you're getting yourself in this kind of entanglement. You're not 17 years old. You're a grown woman. You're nearly 40 years old. You shouldn't be doing some kind of like, this kind of, childish behavior." I really called her out, and she hated it. She unfriended me. She sent me a really nasty message saying, "How dare you do this?" So that was somebody who didn't, take that well. On the other side, there have been women who have wanted to jump on me after I called them out. They just got so sexually aroused and turned on with the fact is that I wasn't tolerating her bullshit. I wasn't tolerating her nonsense. And she said, most guys don't do that. Most guys don't stand up for, they'll tolerate bad behavior. But whereas you did was call her out. So it's hit and miss there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the idea of the sacred dick, I mean, sacred means it's uncommon. You don't use it all of the time, right? If you use the sacred dick all the time, then it's no longer sacred. It's just being a dick. And I think that, at least for me, like the idea of calling somebody out is it has to come from a place of love, a genuine care for the other person and concern for them, as opposed to like, uh, oh, you hurt my feelings, and so now I'm going to call you out on that. So, what about you, Ari? And what do you think about Faisal's, like calling women out? Is using the sacred dick with women, is that something we should do, or is that only reserved for your brothers?
yeah, when you brought up this concept, I was thinking this is something you do just with other men. Um, but then, as Faisal was talking about that woman who said, "Poor you," or
Right.
I
She
love
gave
that
him the dick
story.
or the
Um,
fanny.
I was realizing, okay, yeah, I chose my ex-wife because she called me out on things. So, like, I was looking for some sacred dick in a woman. Um, so, yes, I think you can get that from a woman, but also I think that um, is not something that women want to do for their man. I think that erodes the polarity. So that they want a man who will be the sacred dick to themselves. They don't want to have to do that for you. So that was a very tough lesson that I had to learn in my marriage, and I see it with nice guys. Like, you just they're not calling bullshit on themselves. Like, we need to use the sacred dick on ourselves. Um, so I don't look at it as a woman's job. I would want that ability in a woman that I get into a relationship with, but I never want to expect that from a woman. I expect that from myself or from guy friends. Um,
Well,
but the question was, do I do that to a woman? Do I
or should you?
confront
Or
them or challenge them?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sometimes, especially if they're shit testing, and and I need to set a boundary. Is maybe that's not the same thing, um, but it can be, especially if they're pulling the same thing over and over. You got to whip it out.
Hmm. Well, I guess go back again to the idea of that it's sacred, right? So if your woman is always calling you out all the time, it's a common thing, then that might not be, an appropriate thing. Similarly, if you're calling her out all of the time, that probably isn't a thing. But it's really, really reserved for those times when it's going to help the other person make a shift in either in their thinking, their behavior, or something along those lines. And like I said, kind of in the introduction, it's like getting a glass of water thrown in your face. It's shocking. And if you're always
It's
getting that
special
from
occasion,
somebody,
Dick.
what's that?
It's special occasion, Dick.
The special occasion dick, right? If
Yeah.
you're always getting, water to throw it in your face, it's no longer just a wake up call. It's, you start to get defensive against that. So I think it's something that you use very reservedly, but that you can use it with women as well, as long as it is, like I said, the purpose is about love and correction and help giving them a gift of like, here's the way I kind of look at it is like, I can't see like if I have a chive on my tooth, right? But if somebody points it out, then it's like, oh, okay, that's, and I removed the chive. It's a similar kind of thing. Like, I can't see my own behavior sometimes. So when somebody
Mm.
points it out and points it out maybe in a more obvious way, you know, um, that can be really helpful and useful. But I think the point I'm also trying to make is, as nice guys, we tend to bottle all this stuff up inside of us and then we kind of explode, as opposed to like taking that moment, from the beginning, and just kind of like calling somebody out and saying, hey man, you know you're being a nice guy, you're being you know you're being too soft.
Yeah.
I think that's something that can be really, really helpful for guys to hear, especially guys, but also I think your partners from time to time. But
I think in a relationship that's quite critical, quite important to have. Because if she's calling you out all the time or you're calling her out all the time, that relationship dynamic changes. It's more like a parent-child relationship.
right.
She's acting more like the parent, right? So that's, of course, that's going to kill polarity. Whereas, I've been in relationships where I've been called out constantly, and that became just like a nag. And I wanted to run away from that relationship, and I eventually did, because it was just like constant criticizing. But also, there's been relationships where I've been called out in a sacred way, the timely way, because you remember that, and it's a proper shock, and you're thinking, it makes a real momentous shift. Whereas nagging is just like you become deaf to it. I've also been in relationships where she's been too nice, too people pleasing, too passive. And it's been frustrating because everything I say something, she'd always agree with it. And she'd be like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's amazing. I'm thinking, come on, pull something out here, find something. So I wanted that balance. And what I've realized recently is, in a relationship, they talk about masculine and feminine all the time. yeah, on that layer, I get it. We got to have that polarity, but also on the mature relationship aspect, I do want a partner that we can really have a intellectual conversation about actually calling out our weaknesses and our blind spots, and we can call them out purposefully rather than they coming out, critically. And I've been guilty of this. I've turned things that I should have called out as the sacred became a nag myself. So I really like the fact that I'm practicing this with my kids. And one of the things that Dr. Glover taught me was, when we tend to, tell them off too much or something, he just said, practice the 2-sentence rule. Just saying 2 sentences, very short, firm, to the point, and then let go and move on. And that I find really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking about my friend who called me out. And one of the things he actually did that was just now remembering was he kind of asked for permission first. He kind of was like, hey, Chuck, can I give you some feedback, essentially. And, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I think that might be also something to kind of consider, if you just walk up to somebody and like, you're being a wham wham or something like that, that could be, like you said, you could maybe take offense to that, but maybe one of the things to be able to do first is sort of like ask for permission. It's sort of the whole idea of, getting consent before you whip out the dick. You want to get consent. So, all right, guys. Well, appreciate your thoughts and feedbacks on that. Again, thanks for being part of the Nice Guy Show. And please, if you're watching us on YouTube, remember to like, subscribe, because it really helps us reach more guys that need this kind of information. And if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, make sure to subscribe there as well. And go to theniceguyShow.com to get on our mailing list. And if you like this podcast, check out the one we did a while back. Speaking of dick, this one's called Get Your Balls Back. No more Mr. Nice Guys, Cultivating Courage. It's episode number, I can't remember. Thanks for checking it out. We'll put a link in the description, and we'll see you next time on The Nice Guy Show. You've been listening to The Nice Guy Show with certified Nice Guy recovery coaches Ari Graff, Chuck Chapman, and Faisal Kokar. Be sure to subscribe to this channel so you can listen to our latest episodes, and visit us on www.theniceguyShow.com. If you have any topics you'd like to hear us discuss, send us an email at support@theniceguyShow.com. Thanks for listening.